The axe comes down before the monk can scream. Blood sprays across golden manuscripts that took decades to create. A chalice, worth more than a village, clatters across stone floors. The abbot crawls toward the altar, leaving a red trail behind him. He's praying. Still praying. As if God can hear him over the sound of wood splintering and metal ringing and men laughing. Outside, the beach is black with ships. Dragon heads. Dozens of them. Their sails are red in the morning light. Or maybe that's just the flames reflecting off them as the monastery burns. This is Lindisfarne, June 8, 793 AD. And this is the beginning of 3 centuries of terror. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. These weren't savages. These weren't mindless killers. These were farmers and traders and poets who made a calculated decision that would reshape the entire world. The question isn't why they were so brutal. The question is, what kind of desperation drives men to sail into the unknown, knowing they might never return, just for a chance at something better? The answer is written in blood across every shore from Ireland to Constantinople. And it starts in a place so cold, so harsh, that violence became the only reasonable option. Before the dragon ships, before the raids, before the world knew to fear them, there was Scandinavia. Picture it, mountains that scrape the sky. Fjords so deep that sunlight never touches the bottom. Winters where darkness swallows the day for months at a time, and if your harvest fails, your children starve. Not might starve, will starve. The land could barely feed the people who lived there. Every generation, more sons were born. And the old Norse law was brutal in its simplicity. The firstborn inherits everything. Everyone else, you get nothing. Not the farm, not the land. Not even a piece of it. You had 3 choices. Serve your older brother as a laborer for the rest of your life. Move to unclaimed land so barren that survival was a coin flip. Or sail away and take what you needed from people too weak to stop you. For most young men, it wasn't really a choice at all. But they weren't barbarians. Not yet. In their longhouses, they gathered around fires and told stories. Epic sagas passed down through generations about gods and heroes. About Odin, who sacrificed his eye for wisdom. About Thor, who fought giants with a hammer that shook the earth. About Ragnarok, the end of all things, when gods and monsters would destroy each other in final battle. These stories taught them something. Reputation was everything. A coward's name died with him, forgotten like smoke. A hero's name lived forever in songs and stories. Your deeds were your immortality. They called it Drengskaper, the way of the warrior. Face your enemy. Never retreat. Never beg. Die well, and your story survives. Die poorly, and you deserve oblivion. And they believed, truly believed, that warriors who died with weapons in their hands went to Valhalla, an eternal feast hall where you fought all day, died gloriously, rose again at sunset, and drank with gods all night. Dying of disease in bed? That sent you to hell. A cold, dark, empty place where nothing happened. Forever. So when these men climbed into their ships and sailed toward foreign shores, they weren't just seeking wealth. They were seeking glory. They were auditioning for the afterlife. And that made them the most dangerous warriors Europe had ever seen. The monks of Lindisfarne had no warning. They'd heard rumors, of course. Whispers from travelers about strange ships with dragon heads carved into their prows. Pagan raiders from the north who struck like lightning and vanished like ghosts. But Lindisfarne was holy ground, protected by God. What raider would dare attack the church? On the morning of June 8, 793 AD, they learned the answer. The ships appeared out of the mist, not 1 or 2, but dozens. They didn't stop at a harbor because they didn't need one. The shallow-drafted longships glided right up onto the beach. Warriors poured out before the monks even understood what was happening. These weren't knights in armor. These were men in leather and mail, carrying axes designed to split shields and skulls with equal efficiency. They moved with purpose. They'd done this before. The monastery was rich. Centuries of donations from nobles and kings had filled it with treasures. Silver crosses, golden reliquaries containing saints' bones, jeweled chalices, books with pages edged in gold leaf, each one worth more than a farm. To the monks, these were sacred objects. proof of God's glory. To the Vikings, these were 3 years' worth of plunder in one location. Unguarded, undefended, waiting. The slaughter lasted less than an hour. Some monks were killed immediately, those who fought back or tried to protect the treasures. Others were enslaved, chained together, marched down to the ships. The most valuable items were loaded into sea chests. Everything else that would burn, burned. By midday, the Vikings were gone. Back into the mist. Back across the North Sea. Behind them, Lindisfarne smoldered. The holiest site in northern England, violated, looted, destroyed. The survivors could barely comprehend what had happened. A scholar named Alfred, who'd once studied at Lindisfarne, wrote, "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The church of St. Cuthbert is spattered with the blood of the priests of God, despoiled of all its ornaments." He called it divine punishment, God's wrath for the sins of the English. He was wrong. This wasn't divine intervention. This was the beginning of a new era. The Viking Age had begun. And the question everyone should have been asking was, how did they do it? How did a handful of raiders travel hundreds of miles across open ocean, strike one of the most remote monasteries in England, and escape before any army could respond? The answer was engineering. Viking longships were miracles of design. Vessels that could cross oceans and navigate rivers only 3 feet deep. They had no keel, so they could beach on any shoreline. No port required. No warning given. Each ship was built from overlapping planks, clinker-built, flexing with the waves instead of fighting them. A single mast with a square sail for open water. 30 oars for rivers and raids. They could sail in any direction the wind blew because Viking crews were skilled enough to tack and jibe with precision. A typical longship carried 30 to 60 warriors. They traveled in fleets. By the time you spotted one ship, there were already 10 behind it. And the speed, that was the real weapon. A longship could cover 100 miles in a day with good wind. A marching army, 20 miles, if they were lucky. By the time news of a raid reached the nearest lord, the Vikings were already 3 days away, hitting a different coast. Monasteries and coastal villages had no defense. You couldn't build walls high enough or thick enough to matter because the Vikings didn't siege. They struck and left. By the time you organized a response, they were gone. For the next 70 years, this was the pattern. Summer raids, coastal targets, churches, towns, trading posts, anywhere with portable wealth and weak defenses. The Vikings would appear, take everything of value, enslave anyone useful, kill anyone who resisted, and vanish. The Great Heathen Army. That's what they called themselves. Thousands of warriors from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, unified under a single purpose. They weren't here to raid. They were here to conquer. Leading them were the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok, Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan, and Ubba. Whether Ragnar himself was real or a legend, historians still debate. But his sons, they were real. And they were about to tear England apart. They landed in East Anglia. The local king, Edmund, made a desperate calculation. He didn't have an army large enough to fight them. So he made peace, gave them horses, supplies, let them camp on his land, hoping they'd leave. They didn't leave. They rode north. The kingdom of Northumbria didn't see them coming. The Vikings moved inland, something raiders never did. They established a fortified camp at York, the old Roman city the locals called Eoforwic. And when the Northumbrian army finally arrived to push them out, the Vikings were ready. The battle was a massacre. King Aella was captured alive. Now, supposedly, Aella had killed the Vikings' father years before, thrown Ragnar Lothbrok into a pit of venomous snakes and watched him die in agony. True or not, the Vikings believed it. And they wanted revenge. They executed Aella with the blood eagle, a ritual so brutal that chroniclers could barely describe it. They cut the ribs from the spine and pulled the lungs out through the back, arranging them like wings. Aella died screaming, and the message was clear: do not cross us. Northumbria fell. An entire kingdom, gone. Absorbed into Viking territory. But the sons of Ragnar weren't finished. East Anglia was next. King Edmund, the same king who'd given them horses and supplies, now faced the army he'd tried to appease. He could have run, could have fled to Wessex and lived. But Edmund was devoutly Christian. He refused to renounce his faith or share power with pagans. The Vikings gave him a choice: convert or die. Edmund chose death. They tied him to a tree and used him for target practice. Shot him full of arrows until he looked like a pincushion. Then they beheaded him. Edmund became a saint. His death was commemorated in churches across England. But it didn't save his kingdom. East Anglia fell. 2 kingdoms down. Mercia trembled. And in the south, the Kingdom of Wessex watched in horror as the unstoppable army moved closer. England was dying, and everyone knew it. The Great Heathen Army didn't fight like Christian armies. There was no chivalry, no honor-bound rules, no gentleman's agreement about how warfare should be conducted. When they won a battle, they didn't take noble prisoners for ransom. They took slaves. When they lost a battle, they didn't retreat to regroup. They scattered into forests, raided supply lines, struck from unexpected directions. They were fighting a guerrilla war before Europe had a word for it. King Burgred of Mercia tried to buy them off, paid them silver to leave. And for a while, it worked. The Vikings took the money and marched north. But the next year, they were back. More of them, demanding more silver. Mercia broke. Burgred fled to Rome. And the Vikings installed a puppet king who did exactly what they told him. 3 kingdoms fallen. Only Wessex remained. And Wessex's king, a young man named Alfred, was about to face the worst moment of his life. January 8, 78 AD. The dead of winter. The Viking army, now led by a warlord named Guthrum, attacks during Twelfth Night, one of Christianity's holiest celebrations. It's a calculated insult, a psychological blow. Alfred's royal estate at Chippenham is surrounded before anyone realizes what's happening. The king barely escapes with his life, fleeing into the night with a handful of loyal warriors. The King of Wessex, last hope of England, is now a fugitive hiding in the marshes of Somerset.